So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the government abandoning their own tracking and tracing app in favor of a Google and Apple system. So basically, we know that the government, go away Google, the government were trying to do it alone. Basically, like they call this the NHS coronavirus app, but it's nothing to do really with the NHS. It's more to do with the government and how they deal with the coronavirus with regards to track and trace. So the idea, I guess, is that if someone if you have your Bluetooth on, and so if you come into contact near someone, if they have symptoms of coronavirus, they put it in the app, and then it warns you that you may have come into contact with someone with COVID-19. You should self isolate. And so yeah, the app under development by NHSX and tested on the Isle of Wight only correctly identified contact 75% of the time on Android phones and 4% on iPhones. So you can see that, Apple being a massive seller. I don't know what the dynamics are in the UK, but iPhones sell massively worldwide. And so it's, in the UK, like I can anecdotally, the majority of people in my house have iPhones. My three siblings have them because they're too cool for school. And my mum and I, because we're peasants, we have Android phones. And so that's sarcasm, by the way. Look, you can see here that there's a big problem, and so the government's finally abandoned it. This is corroborated by BBC correspondent Rory Sillen Jones. I'm going to say that's how you pronounce his name. And so we can see that 20th of May, Boris Johnson saying we have growing confidence that we will have a test track and trace operation that will be world beating, and yes, it will be in place by June the 1st, June the 18th. The government has to abandon this. So it's a pretty embarrassing U-turn, to be honest, and there's a lot of time been wasted trying to pursue their own app rather than having some humility and doing what other countries like Germany have done, where they work with the big tech companies, say what you want about them. In this case, it's better to deal with them even from a privacy data perspective, because that data will be deleted rather than giving it to central government, where we don't know where that data is going to go. We know Dominic Cummings is a data boy. He loves data. And so we can see from this, please stop referring to the failed NHS track and trace app. The NHS has nothing to do with it. This was an untendered commercial app endorsed by Matt Hancock and given to Serco to deliver. And this app itself is very dodgy. And I'm trying to figure out what's the worst bit of this app. Is it the failure of the government to actually get this thing working? Or is it the untendered contract that was given to Serco to deliver this app? And so if we go to this one, Lord Bethel reveals to peers that the cost of the failed NHSX app has so far been £11.8 million. So we have wasted almost £12 million on an app that has failed. And that's central government money, giving it to a company which not only has failed, but also it was an untendered contract. That means no one bid for the contract, which meant the price stayed higher. We know that in the running to the Iraq war, a lot of American companies, there's a documentary called Iraq, A War for Sale or something like that, where they were given untendered contracts. And what that means is, say if I'm a company, I can bid whatever I want, and because there's no one else competing, because no one else knows there's a contract up, I will be paid that money. And it's a very dodgy system, to put it safely. So Serco Boss defends his work on setting up the NHS track and trace app. So Rupert Soames says criticisms are largely motivated by ideology amid calls for the £45.8 million pound contract to be cancelled. And so we can see that it's already cost around, where is it? It's already cost around £12 million. So if the government does cancel it, depending on what the contract looks like, the taxpayer may be spared some money, but at the same time, it's a lot of money being wasted by the government on an untendered contract. And so this is from Lewis Goodall. No country currently has, this is the Prime Minister speaking, sorry. No country currently has a functioning track and trace app. I'm not sure what the Germans and Norwegians would have to say about that. South Korea too, not to say that the apps in these countries are perfect, but there will be all sorts of glitches, problems, and obviously privacy concerns as well, which is something we'll touch on in a minute. But we can see that countries do have functioning track and trace apps. So essentially, Boris Johnson is not telling the truth. It was being purposely misleading. Because he says a functioning track and trace app. So whatever you define functioning as, that would be the key word there, semantics, you can argue. And so if we jump to this article here, Germany and Korea explodes flaws in the NHS track and trace plan. So different approaches to contract tracing mean Germany and South Korea reveal the pitfalls that could be ahead. So there are problems here. So it was ditched mid-March, but now April. But now England's track and trace regime is back underway. Sort of more than 25,000 people have been recruited, and we know some of these people they had very little to do. They didn't know what they're doing. Someone was watching Netflix instead of like actually doing their job, which is no surprise. And Keir Starmer pressing Boris Johnson on the track and trace app. So Keir Starmer has pressed Boris Johnson on the effectiveness of the NHS track and trace app system in England during Prime Minister's questions. The Labour leader said it was a big problem and that 10,000 people with coronavirus had been reached despite 33,000 cases. So they're not even reaching a third of the estimated coronavirus cases. But Mr. Johnson criticised Keir Starmer for not supporting government actions. So what's happening here is Boris Johnson is not doing his job properly by giving this contract to Serco, who could not do their job properly. So Keir Starmer's being critical of that, which is fair enough, and Boris Johnson saying, well, it's your fault, why aren't you backing the government? He's not backing the government because A, he's the leader of the opposition, and B, you failed. So I don't know why he's expecting support for failure. Honestly, it's embarrassing stuff. And here we've got our final, is this the final one? No, it's not the final one because there's more, ladies and gentlemen. There's a kicker here, and so Bahrain, Kuwait, and Norway contract tracing apps are among the most dangerous for privacy. So Bahrain, Kuwait, and Norway have run roughshod over people's privacy with highly invasive surveillance tools which go further than what is justified to tackle COVID-19. Privacy must not be another casualty of government's rush to roll out apps. So there is a problem with privacy and where you draw the line. And obviously, South Korea is another one where their tracing stuff is highly invasive to the point where I think they've caught people committing affairs. And so their work is highly invasive, and so it's important to make an app that is there just to track and trace people with coronavirus, not the general public and whatever, because it's very it is highly invasive, and it's not right in a free and fair country. And so we go to our final article, which is we know the app is made by Google and Apple, and so Matt Hancock has said on the 19th of, go away, stupid, Google keeps opening. And we know that Apple don't actually know the UK's latest plan. So Apple says it does not know that the UK was working on a hybrid system version of the NHS coronavirus contract tracing app using tech it developed with Google. The firm took the unusual step of saying it was also unaware of the issue regarding distance measuring, which was flagged by Matt Hancock in Thursday's daily briefing. Apple said it was difficult to understand the claims. Downing Street said the government had worked closely with Apple and Google. So who are you going to believe, yeah? Are you going to believe the government, who have consistently failed in this, or are you going to believe Apple, who said, we haven't worked with you that closely, and clearly we don't know of the issues you're talking about, which is the 4% thing, which is, probably the 4% thing, and so here. And so why, Matt Hancock thinks he can get away with this one, I'm not sure, because it doesn't, it says here, in tests carried out in the UK, there were occasions where software tools developed by Apple and Google could not differentiate between a phone in a user's pocket 1 meter away and a phone in a user's hand 3 meters away. So obviously there are issues here with the I think this is the government app here that they worked in sort of partnership with Google, and obviously that's going to cause issues if you have an iPhone, because it's different software, it's a different OS completely. And so we can see monumental government incompetence on a high scale here. We can see that the government failed in their app. They failed in their job of tendering contracts, which they've done multiple times during this pandemic. And they failed the taxpayer by wasting taxpayer money. And now they've said, okay, fine. This is the only silver line to come from this, which is that the government have finally accepted that they've messed up to an extent. They haven't fully accepted it, but they partially accepted that they've messed up. And they're going to work with Google to get a proper track and trace app, because they were saying that it could take up until the winter to actually get one sorted if they were going to follow the plans they had before. And that's, we're just about to hit summer, really. We're just slightly in summer, so it would have taken, another 6 months? About 6 months to get this sorted, and winter, isn't defined by December. It could be January or February, so it could be till next year. For us to get a track and trace app, which other countries have had for, I think, a few months now. So it's just an embarrassing thing. And so look, I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.